The day my sister disappeared, my life didn't shatter. It just stopped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion like in the movies. It was quiet, a deafening, hollow silence that crept into our home and decided to stay. My name is Emily, and I'm 38 now. But back then, I was just a girl whose world had been stolen, and I had no idea the key to finding it was tangled up in a past I thought I knew. Lily was my younger sister. She was the bright, chaotic spark to my quiet, steady flame. Where I was cautious, she was fearless. The police said she ran away. They saw a note, a few things missing, and mentally closed the case before the file was even properly opened. No leads, they said. Teenagers do this. She'll come back. But I knew Lily. She wouldn't just leave. Not without a word to me. Never like that. The hole she left behind was unbearable, a constant ache that time just refused to touch. My parents, they just crumbled. They became ghosts in their own home, wearing these thin, brittle smiles for the outside world. We were a family drowning in grief, too choked by questions to even speak. Days bled into weeks, weeks into years. The world kept spinning, but I was stuck, haunted by the silence, by the questions that festered in the dark. I felt completely helpless, like I was adrift in an ocean of despair. Nobody seemed to care enough to look for the truth, to see how wrong it all was. The authorities had their easy answer, and the neighbors whispered their own stories, content with a simple explanation. Nobody wanted to look into the shadows. And then, one random Tuesday afternoon, years after I'd last thought about high school, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something pushed me to answer. The voice on the other end was hesitant, older, but I knew it instantly. It was Mr. Harris, my old English teacher. A man I hadn't seen since graduation, a man who once told me I had a fire in me and that I should never let anyone put it out. His voice trembled as he explained he was helping his wife clean out her old classroom. She'd just retired from the same school. They'd found a box of old student projects. Tucked inside one of my old binders was a letter. An envelope with my name scrawled on it in Lily's frantic, looping handwriting. My heart stopped. He said he almost threw it away, but a gut feeling made him open it. What he read filled him with a cold dread. The letter was cryptic, full of strange warnings and disjointed thoughts, but one thing was terrifyingly clear. "Emily," he said, his voice heavy with concern, I think this is about you." In that single moment, that one phone call, a journey I never wanted began, a descent into a darkness I never knew existed, a darkness that I'd been living in my own home all along. Meeting Mr. Harris at a quiet coffee shop felt like stepping into a dream. He looked so much older, his hair completely white, his shoulders stooped with a weight that wasn't just age. He was holding a worn manila envelope, handling it like it was radioactive. He slid it across the table, his eyes filled with a sad, fatherly worry I hadn't seen in years. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said softly. "I have no idea what this means. But I remember your sister's handwriting. And I remember you. You always saw the details others missed." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. It was real. Lily's handwriting, my name. I could almost feel her in the strokes of the pen. I opened it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside were 3 pages torn from a notebook. It was her writing, but the words were from a stranger. A chaotic, terrifying puzzle. "Emily, if you're reading this, I couldn't tell you myself. Don't trust the smiles. The perfect house is a stage. He taught us our lines, but I can't say them anymore. He polishes the outside until it gleams, so no one looks inside. But it's rotting, EMS. It's all rotting from the inside out. He. Who was he? Our father." The words didn't make any sense. My dad was a quiet, gentle man who built bookshelves and read the paper. He wasn't some kind of puppeteer. I kept reading. Remember the opposite day game? Where everything we said meant the other thing. We're still playing. We've been playing for years, and I'm the only one who wants to stop. I love you means I own you. It's for your own good means it's for my own control. He's the king of the game. He makes the rules, and he changes them whenever he wants. A chill snaked down my spine. The opposite day game. That was a silly thing we did when we were kids. How could it be connected to this? As I read, memories I had locked away, things I had dismissed as unimportant, started clawing their way to the surface. I saw our family dinners, not as happy gatherings, but as carefully staged performances. Every smile suddenly seemed forced, every laugh a little too loud. The conversations were always so light, skating on the surface, never daring to go deeper. My parents, with their perfect posture and matching sweaters, became strangers in my mind's eye. They were hiding something behind a wall of suburban perfection. The letter was a key, unlocking a past I had completely misunderstood. It pointed to betrayals I never saw and lies I'd accepted as truth. One passage, in particular, knocked the wind out of me. He turns everything around. He'll make you think you're the crazy one. He told Mom my sadness was just teenage drama. He told Dad my questions were a sign of disrespect. He told you I was jealous of your grades. He puts tiny little cracks in the walls between us and then waits for the whole house to collapse. Don't let it collapse on you, Emily. Get out! Gaslighting. The word exploded in my mind. I didn't have the vocabulary for it back then. I just remembered the confusion. The arguments that would twist and turn until I was apologizing for something I never did. I remembered Lily getting more and more withdrawn, her spark dimming to a flicker. I thought it was just teenage angst. But this letter was telling me it was all by design. A deliberate campaign of psychological warfare. The monster in this story wasn't some stranger in the shadows. He was sitting at our dinner table, smiling as he passed the salt. The letter never named him. It only ever said he. But as I sat there, the puzzle pieces didn't just fall, they slammed into place. It wasn't my father. My father was a victim, too, a pawn in a much bigger game. The letter was talking about my uncle. My charming, successful, charismatic Uncle James. The one everyone loved. The one who was always there, always bringing the best gifts, always the life of the party. The one who called himself the cool uncle. The one whose smile never, ever reached his eyes. I remembered how he'd pull me aside and whisper, "I'm worried about Lily's moods," planting a seed of doubt. Then he'd go to Lily and tell her I was too focused on my own life to understand her, planting a seed of resentment. He built walls, just like the letter said. Tiny, invisible walls that grew into fortresses, isolating us from each other until we were all on our own little islands, with him as the only bridge. And when you're the only bridge, you get to decide who gets to cross. Our perfect family wasn't real. It was a stage, and my uncle was the director. The days after finding the letter weren't a blur. They were sharp, cold, and fueled by a fury I didn't know I had. I felt like I'd been living in a house with boarded-up windows, and Lily's words had just ripped them all down, flooding the place with a harsh, ugly light. Every happy memory was now tainted. The villain who stole my sister wasn't a stranger. It was my Uncle James. James, the man who taught me to ride a bike. James, who gave a teary-eyed toast at my parents' 25th anniversary. James, the man my father looked up to. His charm was his camouflage, and it blinded everyone. He was a master of public perception, a social chameleon who could be exactly who you needed him to be. But underneath that polished surface was a ruthless need for control. His methods were poison dripped slowly over years. Gaslighting was his art form. I remembered Lily at 16, bursting with excitement to audition for the school play. James took her aside that weekend. When she came back, she was deflated. She told me James had explained, with so much fake concern, that she wasn't emotionally resilient enough for the part. He said the rejection would be too much for her delicate nature. He was only saying it, he claimed, to protect her, so she didn't audition. He didn't forbid it. He just expertly dismantled her confidence until she made the choice he wanted, all while thinking it was her own. He wasn't protecting her. He was clipping her wings. His emotional manipulation was a constant hum in the background of our lives. He used guilt like a weapon. I won a scholarship to a summer writing program once, and I was over the moon. But James pulled me aside at a family barbecue, his face a mask of solemn worry. He was proud, he said, but wasn't I worried about leaving Lily alone? She relies on you so much, Emily, he'd said. I just worry she'll feel abandoned. Instantly, my joy curdled into guilt. He had reframed my success as a selfish act that would hurt my sister. And then there was the isolation. That was his grand strategy. He was a gatekeeper. He'd tell my parents an edited version of a conversation he'd had with me, twisting it just enough to create friction. He'd tell my mother that Lily found her overbearing, then tell Lily that Mom was too fragile to handle her problems. He created a system where he was the only one with the full picture. We were all orbiting him, unable to connect directly because he stood in the way, distorting the light. Rereading the letter, I saw it all with sickening clarity. Lily had seen it. She had tried to fight back. Her moods and disrespect. It was all just her refusing to play his game. And for that, he convinced everyone around her, including me, that she was the problem. I had believed him. I had bought the story that Lily was just being difficult. The weight of that guilt was crushing. I hadn't just lost my sister, I had abandoned her long before she ever walked out that door. My anger became a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Not a hot, fleeting rage, but a deep, settled determination. The sorrow was still there, a vast and aching sea, but now the anger was a lighthouse. It gave me a direction. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about dismantling the perfect, beautiful lie James had built, brick by poisonous brick. I had to expose him, not just for Lily, but for me, for the girl who was told her success was selfish, and for the sister who was called crazy because she was the only one sane enough to see the truth. The game was over. I was going to burn the whole board down. Armed with this terrible new clarity, I started digging. My first plan was simple, born of pure rage. Confront James, expose him to the family, and watch his kingdom of lies crumble. I started looking for anything to back up Lily's letter, thinking if I could just find proof of his manipulations, no one could ignore it. I became a detective in my own past, sifting through photo albums and rereading old birthday cards, searching for the patterns. I tentatively reached out to old family friends and distant cousins. I'd start the conversation casually, asking about old times, then steer them towards memories of James. The stories that came back were chillingly similar. A cousin mentioned how James had advised him against an investment that later became a huge success, a deal James then secretly took for himself. A former neighbor recalled how James had spread a rumor, disguised as concern, that broke up her daughter's engagement. He didn't just control our family, he manipulated everyone in his orbit. The real breakthrough, though, came from the last place I expected. While clearing out my parents' attic, I found a small, locked wooden box. It was Lily's box of secrets. I broke the small lock, and what I found inside changed everything. It wasn't just teenage diaries. It was an evidence file. Lily had been building a case against him for years. There were printouts of emails, notes from his phone calls with dates and times, and at the very bottom, a stack of letters. They weren't from Lily. They were to her. The letters were from a girl named Clara. I'd never heard of her. As I read, a new, more horrifying story began to unfold. Clara was James's stepdaughter from a brief, early marriage he'd basically erased from our family history. He always said it ended amicably. These letters proved that was a lie. Clara wrote about the same patterns of control, the same gaslighting, the same isolation. She wrote about his rages, about what he was like when the charming mask came off. The final letter stopped my heart. In it, Clara told Lily she was going to the police to expose James for financial fraud. She was terrified but determined. That letter was dated 2 weeks before Lily disappeared. A quick search online confirmed my worst fear. Clara had vanished a week after writing that letter. She was officially a missing person. And then it all clicked into place, but the picture it made was a nightmare. Lily's disappearance wasn't her running away from us. It was an escape. A calculated, terrified escape. Lily hadn't just figured out James was a manipulator. She had found his other victim. They were talking, planning to expose him together. But then Clara vanished. Lily must have realized that disappearing was what happened to women who stood up to James. He wouldn't risk his reputation, his money, his perfect world. He would have silenced her, just as he had likely silenced Clara. Her disappearance wasn't an act of surrender. It was an act of survival. She didn't run from our family. She ran from him. She ran for her life. This changed everything. The grief I felt was suddenly matched by a sliver of relief. She might be alive. She might be safe. But that relief was immediately choked by a wave of cold dread. This was no longer about exposing a manipulator. This was about a man likely responsible for the disappearance and possible murder of at least one young woman. My mission shifted. This wasn't a family drama, it was a hunt. I needed to find out what happened to Clara and make sure James faced real consequences. My plan to just confront him seemed laughably naive. Confronting a man like that wasn't just dangerous, it was a death wish. I couldn't fight him with words and emotions. I had to fight him with his own weapons, strategy, calculation, and utter ruthlessness. I was no longer seeking an apology. I was seeking a reckoning. My grief and rage focused into a single, sharp point. A violent act might have felt good for a second, but it would have made me a monster like him. Lily was smart. She collected evidence. I would honor her by being smarter. My revenge wouldn't be a crime of passion. It would be a meticulous, psychological deconstruction, a public execution of his reputation. First, I gathered my army. Not soldiers, but his victims. Armed with the names from Lily's box, I found Clara's mother, a broken woman who had been convinced her daughter ran off with a bad crowd. I showed her the letters. The dam of years of pain and doubt broke. She gave me old financial records, documents that showed James forging signatures and stealing from her. I contacted the cousin James had swindled. When I showed him the proof, he burned with a quiet, corporate fury and agreed to help me trace James's other shady dealings. I found the woman whose engagement he'd ruined. She was now a journalist. When I told her my story, she saw the bigger picture, a pattern of predatory behavior that had to be exposed. We were a silent committee of the wronged. The journalist helped me shape the story. The cousin provided the financial ammunition. Clara's mother offered the devastating emotional heart of it all. And I had Lily's letter, the key that unlocked his crimes. We didn't go to the police, not yet. James would have used his army of lawyers to tie it up in knots until it all went away. No, the takedown had to be public. It had to be absolute. We chose the venue for his execution carefully, a major charity gala honoring his philanthropy. The very pinnacle of the public image he'd built for himself. It was the perfect place to set it on fire. The plan was a two-pronged attack. 2 days before the gala, the journalist published her explosive article. It didn't lead with my name. It led with Clara, the forgotten victim, detailing her story and the chilling pattern of a powerful man preying on the vulnerable. It didn't name James, but the details were so specific that anyone in his circle would know exactly who it was. The whispers had begun. Then came the night of the gala. As James stood on stage, soaking in the adoring light, ready for his award, our second wave hit. My cousin, a major donor, had arranged for a surprise tribute video. The video started normally, with people praising James. Then, the screen flickered. Clara's mother appeared, her voice trembling but strong, speaking of her daughter and the man who destroyed her life. Then my cousin appeared, detailing the financial betrayals. Then another voice, and another, a chorus of his victims. The room fell dead silent. You could feel the air shift from celebration to horror. James's smile was frozen on his face. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but he was trapped in the spotlight he loved so much. For the final blow, I had arranged a live feed to the main screen. It was me. I appeared, not hysterical, but calm and cold. I held up Lily's letter. My sister Lily also knew the truth about this man, I said, my voice steady, echoing through the silent hall. She disappeared because she was afraid. This letter she left for me talks about his games, his control, his lies. She knew he was a predator hiding in plain sight. She ran for her life because she knew what he was capable of. Then, I read one last line from her letter. He thinks his perfect world is indestructible. But it's a house of cards, Emily. All it needs is one person to have the courage to blow it all away. I looked straight into the camera. I'm blowing it away. The feed cut. The room erupted into chaos. James just stood there, his face pale, his mask shattered. His reputation, the source of all his power, was annihilated in front of everyone who mattered to him. He stumbled off stage not to applause, but to a storm of shocked whispers and accusing stares. It was a clean, quiet, psychological assassination. The police, prompted by the public outcry, opened formal investigations the next day. His world was over to die, and the aftermath. As the dust settled, there was no triumphant feeling of victory. There was just a quiet, hollow ache. Revenge, I learned, isn't satisfying. It's a painful, clarifying fire. It burns away all the lies and leaves you standing in the cold truth, but it doesn't bring back what you lost. It doesn't heal the wounds. It just cauterizes them, leaving scars. Justice, I realized, isn't about punishment. It's not about watching your enemy suffer. It's about taking back your own story. 4 years, James had been the author of my family's life. He wrote the plot, and he assigned our roles. My final act was simply taking back the pen. It was about telling the true story, not for his sake, but for ours. For Lily, James's social and financial ruin was swift and total. He was arrested, and while the legal battles would be long, his power was gone. The family was shattered, but in a strange way, it was the first honest moment we'd had in decades. The pretense was gone. We were left in the wreckage, forced to be real. I never found out for certain what happened to Lily. In a way, I stopped looking. The greatest gift I could give her was to let her be safe, wherever she is. Her escape was her victory. My takedown of James was just me, bolting the door behind her. I have to believe she found peace, a quiet life far from the shadows of our past. I have to believe she's free. The scars from this will always be a part of me. There's a sadness that will never fade, a phantom limb where my sister used to be. But next to the sadness, there is strength. I'm no longer the girl who was afraid to speak up, the woman riddled with guilt. I'm the woman who stared into the abyss of her family's secrets and didn't blink. I'm colder, maybe. Wiser, definitely. But I am, finally, no longer broken. My name is Emily, and this is a story of how I took my life back.